Ethan Parker had always believed he was a reasonable man, a man who worked hard, paid his bills on time, and tried to be a good husband and father. But lately, life seemed to know exactly where his breaking point was and pushed him there every single day. A missed email could ruin his morning. A slow driver could ruin his afternoon, and one careless comment from a coworker was enough to ruin everything in between. Ethan wasn't just angry, he was exhausted from being angry. And deep inside, he feared one thing. What if the real problem wasn't the world, but him? Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed, because the truth in this story might hit closer than you expect. On a quiet stretch of suburban America, where houses lined up perfectly like they were built to hide people's imperfections, Ethan lived in a modest two-story home with his wife, Sarah, and their 8-year-old son. From the outside, it looked like the kind of life many people wished for: stability, family, a steady job at a software company. But behind the curtains, behind the small talk with neighbors, behind every polite smile he forced, Ethan was fighting a war no one could see. Mornings were the worst. A simple spill of cereal on the counter could set him off. A misplaced car key could ignite a whole argument. A traffic jam could turn his breath sharp and shallow. He didn't mean to yell, he didn't want to yell, but something inside him snapped so easily it scared him every time. Sarah had learned to step carefully around him during these moments, not because she feared him, but because she feared the version of him he couldn't control.
At work, it wasn't any better. Ethan wasn't just known as the guy who delivered results. He was also known as the guy whose temper could change the whole atmosphere of a room. Some coworkers avoided him, some tolerated him, and a few whispered behind his back, calling him a ticking time bomb or the guy who needs anger management. The truth? Ethan knew they were right, and knowing that only made him feel even worse. He hated the version of himself that surfaced during those moments. The tense shoulders, the clenched jaw, the sharp tone, the way his son's face dropped whenever he raised his voice. Every night as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, guilt sat on his chest like a weight he couldn't push off. But he always had an explanation for his anger. Traffic was insane. Deadlines were unreasonable. People didn't listen. People were rude. People disrespected him. People. Everyone but him. In his mind, he was reacting to a world that kept poking at him. He was the victim of other people's behavior. He was the one being pushed, cornered, triggered. At least, that's what he thought. One Tuesday morning, the morning that would later become the turning point of his life, Ethan arrived at work already irritated. He hadn't slept well, the dishwasher had broken, his son refused to eat breakfast, and a minivan had cut him off at a four-way stop. But the real spark that lit the fuse happened at 9:17 a.m. in Conference Room 3A. The team was gathered around the table for a major client presentation, a presentation Ethan had stayed up preparing until nearly midnight. As the meeting began, his manager clicked on the slides. A progress bar spun, then froze.
File corrupted. Everyone stared at the screen, then at Ethan, then back at the screen. His coworker, Mason, the same coworker who always promised he'd double-check everything but never did, leaned back in his chair and muttered, loud enough for the room to hear, "Guess someone didn't save properly." The room went so still you could hear the hum of the air conditioner. And something inside Ethan detonated. His voice exploded before his brain could catch it. A sharp, furious burst of rage. A string of words he would regret for months. A silence afterwards so heavy it felt physical. Mason's face drained of color. The manager cleared her throat, avoiding eye contact. Someone at the table discreetly closed their laptop. And Ethan realized he was shaking. His pulse hammered against the sides of his neck. His hands trembled. His vision blurred for a second. It was the moment he had feared, the moment he looked exactly like the man he didn't want to be. When the meeting ended, no one spoke to him. No one had to. The shame in his chest spoke louder than any words. Ethan left the building and walked to the parking lot, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to understand why he kept destroying the peace he wanted so badly. He leaned against his car and whispered to himself, "Why do I always end up feeling worse after trying to feel right?" And that was the moment, the exact moment, his life quietly began to change. Not because someone comforted him, not because someone apologized, not because the world suddenly became easier, but because for the first time, Ethan questioned whether the real enemy wasn't outside, but inside. Ethan drove home in a silence so heavy it felt like another passenger in the car. The road blurred past him. Convenience stores, gas stations, the familiar billboards on Highway 42, but none of it registered. All he could hear was his own breathing, ragged and uneven, and those 4 words replaying in his mind like a broken record. Guess someone didn't save properly. It wasn't the comment itself that broke him. It was the way it echoed everything he feared about himself. Careless, reckless, always one mistake away from blowing up. Mason's offhand remark had been gasoline on a fire that had been burning inside him for years. By the time Ethan pulled into his driveway, his hands were still trembling on the steering wheel. He sat for a moment, staring at his reflection in the rearview mirror, a man with tired eyes, clenched jaw, and a face flushed with the aftermath of anger. He didn't recognize himself, or rather, he didn't want to. Inside the house, the smell of spaghetti sauce filled the air. Sarah was stirring a pot in the kitchen while their son Liam colored at the dining table. It should have been a comforting scene. It should have been the kind of moment that anchored him. But when Sarah looked up and asked softly, "Long day?" Ethan felt the heat creeping back up his throat. Not anger at her, just anger that had nowhere to go. He muttered, something like that, and headed straight upstairs. Behind the closed bedroom door, the quiet didn't soothe him, it suffocated him. His chest tightened, and he pressed his palms against his forehead, trying to push the pressure away. How did he get here? How did a man with a decent life and a loving family become someone who couldn't go a day without losing control? His mind spiraled. He remembered the first time Sarah flinched at his raised voice. He remembered the disappointment in his manager's eyes after one of his outbursts. He remembered Liam asking, "Daddy, why are you mad again?" The guilt sat in his stomach like a stone. He wanted to change. He wanted to stop snapping, shouting, exploding. But every time he tried, something in him fired too fast, like a gun with a hair trigger. And today, he felt that trigger more clearly than ever. Later that night, long after dinner, after the dishes were washed and Liam had gone to bed, Sarah sat next to him on the couch. She didn't look angry. She didn't look hurt. She just looked tired. "Ethan," she said softly, "you're scaring people at work." He exhaled, leaning back. "I know." "And you're scaring yourself," she added. He closed his eyes. She was right. He was scared. Scared of who he was becoming. Scared that one day his anger would cost him something he couldn't fix. Sarah continued, "You're not a bad person, but you can't keep living like this." Ethan nodded, unable to speak. "You need help, Ethan. Real help." There it was, the sentence he had avoided for years. He didn't explode this time. He didn't defend himself or blame anyone else. He just sat there, feeling something break loose inside him. Not anger, but the truth he had been fighting. "I don't know what's wrong with me," he whispered. Sarah reached for his hand. "Maybe it's not what's wrong. Maybe it's what's unresolved." Her words landed deeper than she knew. The next morning, Ethan left for work early, hoping the quiet sunrise would calm him. But instead of heading straight to the office, he parked near a small public park he had driven past countless times but never entered. He walked along the path, hands in pockets, thoughts tangled and heavy. Birds chirped. Children laughed on a playground. Joggers passed by. The world looked peaceful, almost mocking.
Why was peace so easy for everyone else? Why did it feel impossible for him? He found an empty bench near a small lake. The surface of the water shimmered, perfectly still. It irritated him, the stillness. Why couldn't he be like that? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, trying to slow his breath. That's when he noticed an elderly man sitting a few yards away, feeding birds with deliberate gentleness. A calmness radiated from the man, the kind of peace Ethan had forgotten existed. The man glanced at him and smiled, not the polite neighborly smile, but a knowing, warm one. Ethan looked away, embarrassed. He didn't want anyone to see him like this. But the man spoke first. "Rough day?" Ethan hesitated. "Rough life, maybe." The man chuckled softly. "Ah, that kind of day." Something in his tone, calm, non-judgmental, grounding, disarmed Ethan. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt the smallest shift inside him. A crack in the wall he built around his anger. A quiet invitation to finally face himself. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this accidental meeting, would change everything. Not because the world was going to get easier, but because Ethan was about to meet someone who would show him a truth he'd never considered. Anger isn't something people give you, it's something you carry. And the only way to stop being controlled by it is to understand why it exists in the first place.
The old man didn't rush him. He tossed another small piece of bread toward a pigeon and watched it waddle closer. After a moment, he turned his head slightly. "So," he said, "what made today heavier than usual?" Ethan let out a breath through his nose. "You don't know me." "That's true," the man replied, "but I know that look. Tight shoulders, locked jaw, eyes that are here but somewhere else at the same time. I've seen it in a mirror more than once." That answer disarmed Ethan more than any personal question could have. He sank back against the bench, staring at the lake. "There was this meeting," he started, voice low, "a big one. I worked my ass off for it. Something went wrong. Someone made a joke. I lost it, in front of everyone." The man nodded, like he'd heard this story 1,000 times. "And now?" "Now I feel like an idiot," Ethan said, "like I keep proving everyone right about me." "Angry man?" the old guy asked gently. Ethan gave a humorless laugh. "Yeah, that one." The man extended a hand. "Name's Howard. Some people call me Doc. Old habit from a long time teaching psychology." Ethan blinked, then shook his hand. "Ethan." "Well, Ethan," Doc said, "you look like someone who's tired of his own patterns." The words landed so precisely, Ethan actually turned to look at him, studying his calm expression. There was no judgment there, only recognition. "I am," he admitted. "I'm so damn tired of it. It feels like I'm watching myself from the outside when I blow up. I know it's happening. I know I shouldn't, but it's like by the time I notice, it's already too late." Doc tilted his head. "Tell me something. When someone triggers your anger, how long does it stay with you?" Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "Well," Doc continued, "let's say someone cuts you off in traffic, or a coworker insults you. How long does that anger live in you after they're gone? Minutes? Hours?" Ethan stared at the lake, thinking. "Sometimes the whole day. I'll replay it over and over." "And at night?" Doc pressed gently. "Sometimes I wake up thinking about it," Ethan admitted, "like my brain won't let it go." Doc nodded slowly. "And while all of that is happening, while the anger is living in you, where are they?" "Who?" "The people who triggered it." Ethan's jaw flexed. "I don't know. At home? At work? Living their lives." "Probably not thinking about you," Doc added, matter of fact. That stung more than Ethan expected. He swallowed. "Probably not." "So," Doc said, "if they've moved on and you haven't, whose anger is it at that point?" The wind rustled the trees overhead. A dog barked in the distance. For a moment, Ethan forgot to answer. He'd spent his whole life blaming them. The rude driver, the inconsiderate coworker, the kid who didn't listen, the world that didn't cooperate. In his mind, his anger was a reaction, a consequence of what others had done. But Doc's question twisted that logic into something uncomfortably clear. "I guess," Ethan said slowly, "it's mine."
Doc smiled faintly. That realization right there, that's where real change starts. Ethan's first instinct was to argue. But if they didn't do what they did, I wouldn't get mad. Doc nodded. Of course, people do unfair, stupid, careless things every day. That's reality. But here's the part most people never question. They don't put the anger inside you. They only poke what's already there. Ethan looked at him, brows furrowed. Doc continued. Imagine someone bumps into an empty glass. Nothing spills. But if the glass is already full of coffee, one small bump and it goes everywhere. You blame the bump. But the real problem is how full the glass already was. Ethan leaned back slowly, absorbing that. So you're saying I'm full of anger? I'm saying you're full of unexamined emotion, Doc replied. Anger is just the easiest one to see. Ethan let the words sit for a moment. Somewhere inside, something softened. Not in a comfortable way, but in the way a tightly knotted rope loosens for the first time. Okay, he said quietly. Let's say you're right. What am I supposed to do? Meditate on a rock? Chant mantras? I'm not that guy. Doc chuckled. I'm not interested in turning you into anyone else. I'm interested in helping you stop handing your mood to strangers. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means, Doc said, that every time you explode because of what someone else did, you're telling them, here, take my peace, you decide how I feel today. The sentence slipped into Ethan's mind and sat there, heavy. He thought about Mason in the meeting room, about the man who cut him off on the road that morning, about the barista who'd messed up his coffee order last week. Had he really been giving that much power to people he barely knew? Doc didn't push. He just watched Ethan wrestle with the idea. After a long silence, Ethan finally asked, "Do you ever get angry?" Doc's eyes crinkled at the edges. Of course I do. I'm not a rock. But over time, I learned something important. Anger is a signal, not a steering wheel. You're not supposed to let it drive. And how do you not let it? Ethan asked. That, Doc said, standing up slowly, takes practice and a little bit of curiosity about your own mind. He tossed the last piece of bread to the birds. I come to this park most mornings, he added. If you really want to understand why you keep exploding, come back tomorrow. Bring coffee. Ethan frowned. Coffee? Doc smiled. You'll see. With that, the old man walked away down the path, hands in his pockets, as if he hadn't just shifted the ground under Ethan's feet. Ethan sat there long after Doc disappeared from view. For the first time, instead of thinking about what other people had done to him, he found himself asking a different question. What exactly was he carrying inside that spilled out so easily? He didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time in a very long time, he wanted to find out. Ethan returned to the park the next morning, long before the sun had fully claimed the sky. The air was crisp, tinged with the smell of wet grass and fresh earth. He hadn't slept well. His mind kept circling around Doc's words, replaying them like a loop he couldn't break. They don't put the anger inside you. They only poke what's already there. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't dreading the morning. He was curious. Uneasy, yes, but curious. He spotted Doc sitting at the same bench as yesterday, legs crossed, hands resting comfortably on his cane. The simple sight of him felt oddly grounding. You came, Doc said with a soft nod. You asked me to, Ethan replied, holding out a cup. Black coffee, no sugar. Hope that's right. Doc chuckled. Good guess. Ethan sat beside him, unsure how to start. Doc, as usual, didn't rush. Tell me, Doc said, how did yesterday sit with you? Ethan rubbed his thumb over the rim of his cup. Weirdly, it made sense, more than I wanted it to. Doc smiled knowingly. Good, then let's take the next step. He reached into a small paper bag and pulled out 2 cups, one empty, one half full of coffee. Let's play a little game. Ethan raised an eyebrow. A game? Doc nodded toward the half-full cup. Shake it. Ethan hesitated, then did what he was told.
Coffee sloshed over the rim and dripped onto the ground. "What came out?" Doc asked. "Coffee." "Why?" "Because that's what's in the cup." Doc pointed at Ethan's chest. "Exactly. When life shakes you, criticism, traffic, inconvenience, disrespect, whatever is inside of you comes out." Ethan looked down at the spilled coffee, the dark stain seeping into the dirt. "So when I snap," he began, "it's not because of them, it's because that's already in me." Doc nodded. "Anger, fear, old wounds, old habits. Those don't appear out of nowhere. They live in you, quietly, until someone bumps your cup." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. The truth stung, not in a painful way, but in a way that forced honesty. Doc continued. "Most people spend their whole lives blaming the bump. The rude stranger, the careless driver, the coworker with attitude. But the spill is theirs." Ethan looked at the lake, watching sunlight slowly spread across the water. "So what do I do?" he asked. "Just empty the cup?"
Doc laughed softly. If only it were that easy. You don't empty the cup. You learn what's inside it. You learn to stop filling it with things that poison you. He tapped his cane lightly. "Let me show you something else." Doc reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small packet of sugar. He tore it open and poured it into the empty cup, then followed with a bit of water from his own bottle. He swirled it gently. "See this? Sugar dissolves slowly, just like patience, just like self-awareness. You don't pour it all at once. You build it moment by moment." Ethan watched the grains fade into the water, turning it slightly cloudy before clearing again. "When the cup is filled with calm," Doc said, "life still shakes you. People still test you. But what comes out isn't poison." Ethan exhaled, long and deep. He felt something inside him loosen, like a knot that had been tight for years finally giving way. "But how do you keep calm when people push every button you have?" he asked. Doc leaned back, eyes slightly narrowed as if choosing his words carefully. "You pause," he said simply. Ethan blinked. "That's it?" "That's the beginning," Doc continued. "The pause between what happens and how you respond, that's your power. Most people react instantly because reacting feels good, it feels justified. But responses, those require awareness, intention, strength." Ethan remembered the meeting room yesterday, how instantaneous his explosion had been. There had been no pause, no breath, just fire. "And what if the pause doesn't come?" he asked quietly. Doc smiled. "Then you try again next time, and the time after that. Change doesn't happen in a day, but recognition happens in a moment. And once you see your patterns, you can't unsee them." Ethan looked out at the water again. For once, it didn't irritate him. It steadied him. "So you're saying there's nothing wrong with me?" Ethan asked. "Oh, there's plenty wrong with you," Doc said with a grin. "Just like there's plenty wrong with me. Plenty wrong with everyone. The goal isn't to fix everything. It's to understand yourself enough to stop letting your emotions run your life." The wind rustled through the trees. A jogger passed by. A dog barked in the distance. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel like he was drowning in his own reactions. Doc placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "The world isn't going to stop shaking you," he said, "but you can learn what you spill and why." Ethan swallowed, overwhelmed in a way that wasn't panic and wasn't pain. It was clarity. "I want to understand it," he said finally. "All of it. The anger, the patterns, why I get this way." Doc nodded. "Then come back tomorrow. We're just getting started." As Doc stood to leave, Ethan stared at the spilled coffee on the ground, the dark stain slowly disappearing into the soil. For the first time, he didn't see a mess. He saw a beginning, a chance to rewrite everything that had been spilling out of him for far too long. "The world isn't going to stop shaking you," he said, "but you can learn what you spill and why." Ethan swallowed, overwhelmed in a way that wasn't panic and wasn't pain.
It was clarity. "I want to understand it," he said finally. "All of it. The anger, the patterns, why I get this way." Doc nodded. "Then come back tomorrow. We're just getting started." As Doc stood to leave, Ethan stared at the spilled coffee on the ground, the dark stains slowly disappearing into the soil. For the first time, he didn't see a mess. He saw a beginning, a chance to rewrite everything that had been spilling out of him for far too long. For the next few days, Ethan tried to carry Doc's teachings with him the way someone carries a fragile object, carefully, deliberately, hoping not to break it. He didn't expect miracles, but he expected something, a shift, a change, a sign that he wasn't the same man who had erupted in conference room 3A. Life, of course, had other plans. The first test came early, before sunrise actually. Liam accidentally knocked over his bowl of cereal while rushing to grab his backpack. Milk splashed across the counter, then dripped onto the floor in slow, sticky streams. A week ago, Ethan would have snapped instantly. The sharp inhale, the stern voice, the anger that masked itself as teaching responsibility. But this time, a voice surfaced in his mind. When life shakes you, what spills out? He froze. A breath. A pause. Just like Doc said. Liam looked up at him, wide-eyed, waiting for the storm. Ethan forced his shoulders to relax. "It's fine," he said softly. "Grab a towel. We'll clean it up." Liam blinked, confused, as if he'd just witnessed a glitch in reality. But Ethan meant it, and strangely, it felt good. He drove to work feeling lighter, almost proud. Until the second test arrived. Traffic. A line of cars stretching so far he couldn't see the end. A blaring horn behind him. A driver cutting across lanes without signaling. The usual chaos of morning commute, but somehow it felt amplified today, like the universe was intentionally piling everything on him. His pulse quickened, fingers tightened around the steering wheel. The old instinct surged, tension, irritation, explosion. Another breath. Pause. He remembered Doc's words. "The world won't stop shaking you, but you can decide what spills out." Something inside him softened again. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. He made it to the office without humping at a single person. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Still, Ethan knew the real test was coming. He could feel it, and he didn't have to wait long. It happened on Thursday afternoon, a team meeting. Same conference room, same tense fluorescent lighting, same coworker, Mason, leaning back in his chair, smirking at something on his phone. Ethan took his seat and breathed slowly. Stay calm, he told himself. Stay steady. The meeting began. His manager started reviewing the quarterly results. Then she shifted to their department's mistakes, delays, miscommunications, errors. Some of the setbacks, she continued, came from the incident during Monday's presentation. Ethan's stomach tightened. He kept his eyes lowered, hoping the moment would pass. But Mason leaned forward, cleared his throat, and said casually, "Well, some people just can't handle pressure. Isn't that right, Ethan?" Snickers floated around the table. Not loud, but loud enough to cut. Ethan felt it instantly, the heat rising in his neck, the pounding in his chest, the familiar storm forming, fast and wild. His fist clenched beneath the table, his vision narrowed, his jaw locked. Here it was, the moment where the old Ethan would explode without thinking, without breathing, without pausing. His mind screamed to react, to defend himself, to throw the words back harder. But then he heard it, faint, quiet, almost like a memory whispering in his ear. Don't hand your mood to strangers. His breath caught, his shoulders lowered. He paused, a full second, then another, then another. Mason raised an eyebrow, waiting for the explosion. Everyone did, but Ethan didn't explode. He lifted his gaze, met Mason's eyes, and said calmly, "You're right about one thing. I didn't handle Monday well. I'm working on that." Silence. A thick, unexpected silence. No one knew what to do with Ethan's composure, least of all Mason. The manager nodded slowly, almost impressed. "Well, good, let's move on." And just like that, the moment passed. But inside Ethan, something shifted so deeply it almost frightened him. He wasn't shaking, he wasn't sweating, he wasn't drowning in shame or rage. He was steady. The rest of the meeting continued, but Ethan barely heard any of it. His mind was still replaying the moment, not the insult, but his response, not the trigger, but the pause. He walked out of the conference room with a strange sensation spreading through him, not adrenaline, but relief. A quiet, powerful relief. He passed Mason in the hallway. Mason didn't make eye contact. Ethan didn't need him to. For the first time in his adult life, Ethan had chosen peace over pride, self-control over reaction, intention over impulse. And as he stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, he whispered to himself, "I didn't spill anger." The wind felt different that day, lighter, like the world was reflecting something back at him, something he hadn't felt in years. Control, real control. And deep inside, he knew. Doc had been right. The world hadn't changed, he had.
That evening, long after the office had emptied and the sunset had washed the sky in shades of orange and deep purple, Ethan found himself driving toward the park again. He wasn't sure why. Doc hadn't told him to come today. There was no lesson planned, no assignment, no ritual. But something inside him needed to return. Not for Doc's guidance, at least not entirely, but for space. Space to breathe, space to understand what had happened inside him that afternoon. He parked his car, stepped out, and felt the cool air on his skin. The wind carried a faint scent of pine mixed with fresh water from the lake. It grounded him, calmed him. Doc was already there, sitting on the bench like a man who had all the time in the world. His cane leaned against his side, and a flock of ducks circled him like old friends. "You're early," Doc said without looking up. Ethan sat down beside him. "I wasn't planning to come," he admitted, "but something happened today." "Oh?" Doc smiled, still feeding the ducks. "Then let's hear it." Ethan took a deep breath. "Mason tried to provoke me in the meeting, in front of everyone." Doc chuckled softly. "That man seems to be your personal trainer. He keeps giving you opportunities to practice." Ethan smiled despite himself. "Yeah, well, this time I didn't take the bait." Doc finally turned, studying him with warm, sharp eyes. "Tell me." "I felt the anger rise, fast, strong, same as always. But..." Ethan paused, searching for the right words. "But something stopped me, like a hand on my shoulder telling me to wait." "The pause," Doc said quietly. "Yeah." "That moment didn't exist for you before," Doc added, "but now it does." Ethan nodded slowly. "And it changed everything." Doc leaned back, hands resting atop his cane. "Most people think the goal is to never feel anger again. That's impossible. Anger is natural. But what you did today, that is mastery." Ethan let the words sink in. Mastery felt too big for him, too heavy, too wise. "I don't know about mastery," he said, "but I've never felt anything like that. It was like choosing myself over the reaction." Doc smiled proudly. "Exactly. You reclaimed your agency." Those words struck something deep. "Doc, I always thought people made me angry, that they controlled how I felt. And now? And now I think," Ethan swallowed, feeling truth rise in his chest, "I think I let them." Doc tapped his cane lightly on the ground, once, firm. That realization is what most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Blaming the world is easier than facing yourself. Ethan exhaled, staring out over the water. The lake was calm tonight, perfectly still, reflecting the last stretch of purple sky like a mirror. "Why was I like that?" he asked. "Why did everything get inside me so easily?" Doc didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, "How long have you been trying to be perfect?" Ethan blinked. "What?" Doc repeated, How long have you been trying to be perfect? At work, at home, in everything? Ethan stared at the ground. A memory surfaced, sudden and sharp. His father standing over him at age 10, saying, "Do it right or don't do it at all." Another memory, being told to toughen up, to stop overreacting, to get it together. The impossible expectations, the quiet pressure, the invisible scoreboard he was always failing. "I guess a long time," Ethan whispered. Doc nodded gently. Anger often grows in people who were never allowed to be human, who think every mistake is weakness, who carry expectations they never agreed to.
Ethan swallowed hard. No one had ever said it so clearly. Doc continued, "Anger isn't always rage. Sometimes it's pain that was never heard. Sometimes it's fear wearing armor." Ethan closed his eyes. He felt something warm gather in his chest. Not pain, not sadness, but release. A slow, soft unraveling of knots he had carried since childhood. "So it wasn't the traffic," he murmured, "or the spilled cereal, or Mason." Doc placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder again. The same gesture as their first lesson, but now it felt heavier, wiser. "It was the boy who never felt like he was enough," Doc said softly. Ethan's throat tightened. His eyes burned. Not from shame, but from truth. He didn't cry, but for the first time, he could have, and it would have been all right. Doc continued, "Once you understand the roots of your reaction, the reaction loses its power." Ethan nodded, still staring at the calm lake. And he realized something profound. He wasn't fighting his anger. He was meeting the parts of himself he had ignored for decades. They sat together in silence, a silence that didn't crush him, but supported him, a silence that felt like healing. After a while, Ethan said, "So what now?" Doc smiled. "Now comes the practice of living differently." Ethan breathed deeply, letting the cool air fill him. "Feels like I'm finally starting to live," he murmured. Doc nodded. "That's the awakening." Weeks slipped by, and though Ethan wouldn't have been able to pinpoint the exact day it happened, something in him had undeniably shifted. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't sudden, but it was real, a quiet transformation taking root in the background of his everyday life. He didn't become a different man overnight. He simply became more aware of the man he was becoming. It started with small things, a calmer tone when talking to Liam, a more patient response when Sarah couldn't find her keys, a quiet breath before addressing a coworker who dropped the ball on a task. Each moment built upon the last, like bricks forming the outline of a new foundation. One morning, while helping Liam tie his shoes before school, Ethan realized something startling. He hadn't shouted in over 2 weeks, not once, not at home, not at work, not in traffic, not at life. It wasn't that life had stopped being life, unpredictable, messy, imperfect. He had simply stopped surrendering his peace so easily. And people noticed. Sarah noticed first. She saw it in the way he bent down to Liam's level to explain instead of reprimand, in the way he approached dinner conversations with curiosity rather than criticism, in the way he listened, truly listened, when she talked about her day. One night, after Liam had gone to bed, she sat beside Ethan on the couch, tracing her fingers along the back of his hand. "You're different," she whispered. Ethan exhaled, smiling gently. "I'm trying." "No," she said, shaking her head. "You're not just trying, you're changing. And I want you to know, I see it. I see you." Her voice trembled at the last word, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Ethan felt something warm bloom inside his chest. He didn't need to speak. The silence between them was full enough. At work, the shift was just as visible. The same coworkers who once avoided him now approached him with questions, ideas, even jokes. Meetings stopped feeling like battlegrounds. Disagreements no longer ignited sparks. And Mason, yes, even Mason, became strangely respectful, almost unsure of how to act around this version of Ethan. One afternoon, during a team brainstorming session, Mason muttered something under his breath, a comment that would have set Ethan off months ago. But this time, Ethan simply glanced over and said with untouched calm, "Let's focus on solutions, okay?" Mason blinked, surprised. "Yeah, sure." It wasn't dominance, it wasn't submission, it was control, the healthy kind. And people felt it. His manager pulled him aside near the end of the week. "I don't know what you're doing differently," she said, "but whatever it is, it's working. The team responds to you better. You're clearer, more grounded. I'm proud of you." Ethan nodded, humbled. "Thank you." He didn't say it aloud, but he knew. He was finally becoming the leader he'd always wanted to be.
But the most important moment, the moment that quietly sealed his transformation, happened on a Sunday afternoon. Liam had invited a friend over. The kids were playing in the living room when one of them accidentally knocked Ethan's favorite framed photo off a shelf. The glass shattered across the floor. The sound snapped Ethan to attention. Both boys froze, wide-eyed, waiting for the explosion. Ethan walked over, knelt down, and picked up the frame gently. He looked at the broken glass, then at the two terrified faces in front of him. And he smiled. "It's okay," he said softly. "Are you guys hurt?" They shook their heads. "Then we're good. Accidents happen. Let's clean this up together." Liam blinked twice, stunned. His friend stared like he was witnessing a magic trick. But for Ethan, it wasn't magic. It was awareness. It was choice. It was everything Doc had taught him, distilled into a single moment. As they swept the floor together, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years. Lightness. Real, quiet, peaceful lightness. That evening, Ethan drove to the park again, not because he was lost, but because he wanted to share something with the man who had helped him find his way. Doc was there, of course, feeding the ducks like he always did. Without waiting for an invitation, Ethan sat beside him. "I think I understand now," he said. Doc smiled. "Understand what?" "That peace isn't something you find," Ethan said. "It's something you stop giving away." Doc nodded slowly. "And who were you giving it to all these years?" "Everyone," Ethan replied. "Anyone who poked the anger I was already carrying." Doc looked at him with a proud, steady gaze. "So, are you angry?" he asked. Ethan breathed in the cool evening air, then exhaled. "Sometimes," he said honestly, "but it doesn't control me anymore. I respond now. I don't react." Doc tapped his cane lightly on the ground. "Then you're living, my friend, really living." Ethan turned his eyes toward the shimmering lake. The water was calm, not because the wind had stopped, but because the storm inside him had. He whispered almost to himself, "When I stopped reacting, I started living." And for the first time in years, Ethan believed every word.